I have a story for you that really isn't humorous, and it was a kind of career-changing experience for me. On other videos, I've mentioned that when I was a young man, I was a psychiatric resident at the University of Pennsylvania. I'd gone to Stanford for medical school. What I learned in my residency just was not effective. I wanted to be able to help people dramatically and quickly, and I just never saw it in the therapy where you encourage people to talk and you give them antidepressants, and the next week the same thing happens and keeps happening. And in my experience, I rarely saw people going from despair to joy. And then I heard about a new approach developed by a couple of people. One, Albert Ellis, who was this kooky psychologist in New York, a real wild guy, but he was talking about in the 1950s, picking up on the Greek philosopher Epictetus and his followers who were claiming that thoughts cause feelings, not events. We feel the way we think. And Ellis was saying that, when we're upset, we're giving ourselves a lot of negative thoughts and should statements. I should be better, or the world shouldn't be so screwed up, and stuff like that. And we agitate ourselves with our thoughts. And by changing your thoughts, you could change the way you feel. And then 10 years later, Aaron Beck from the University of Pennsylvania in the 1960s, he picked up on this. They both had been psychoanalysts, but also, like myself, were looking for fast change in people. Then also added the idea of the cognitive distortions. Not only are you having negative thoughts when you're depressed and anxious, but those thoughts are distorted, like with all or nothing thinking and overgeneralization and mind reading, fortune telling, emotional reasoning, should statements, self-blame, and many more. And so when I heard about this new approach, I went to Dr. Beck's weekly seminars. I was still a postdoctoral fellow, and I thought, well, I'll check it out. It sounds kooky. I don't believe that seriously depressed people could be helped by changing the way they think. That's what Ellis and Beck were claiming. And I said, I'll just go to his weekly seminars and learn what Beck was then calling cognitive therapy. And Beck was saying that your thoughts or cognitions cause depression. They're distorted thoughts. And when you change the way you think, you can change the way you feel. Oh boy, that sounded so good. And I thought it was just incredible horseshit. And you might too. That shows that you're a critical thinker like I was. But to find out, I decided to try it on some of my most difficult patients who I was stuck with. And I remember I had a patient referred to me from the intensive care unit of the University of Pennsylvania Hospital, where she'd made a nearly completed suicide attempt, but she survived, and they sent her to me for follow-up care. And I thought, well, I'll try this new cognitive therapy on her and see if it's any good. And so with her permission, I presented her in the weekly cognitive therapy seminar I went to, where I was kind of learning this new approach. And I was very skeptical. Back were these little goofy bow ties. And so I presented her case, and I said, well, Dr. Beck, how would I work with this woman who nearly killed herself? And she seems extraordinarily depressed. And Beck says, well, ask her what she was thinking the moment she attempted suicide, because all of our emotions come from our thoughts. So she was telling herself something, so go ask her what it was. So the next time I saw her, she said, what'd you learn in the seminar? And I said, well, Dr. Beck said I should ask you what you were thinking the moment you decided to kill yourself. And she said, oh yeah, that's easy. I was telling myself I was a worthless human being, because you see, I've never done anything my whole life except for clean people's houses and scrub their floors. And I've never done anything meaningful or worthwhile. And so I feel like a worthless human being. And that's why I decided to kill myself. And it was really sad. And she said, what should I do? How does this new therapy work? I said, well, I don't know what you're supposed to do. Just wait another week. I'll go and ask Dr. Beck. And Dr. Beck said, well, use a technique called examine the evidence. That's one of the techniques we use to challenge these distorted negative thoughts. You see, when people are depressed, they're telling themselves things that aren't true and believing it. And that's true of you right now. If you're feeling depressed or anxious, your head is flooded with distorted thoughts. And so I said, what should I tell her? And he says, well, just ask her to make a list of things she has achieved. And that's called examine the evidence. And I said, oh, that's logical. So when I saw her the next week, she said, what did you learn? I said, well, he said you're supposed to make a list of things that you have accomplished. And she said, well, Dr. Burns, that's just the problem. I've never accomplished anything important or worthwhile. I've just been a house cleaner. I scrub people's floors, vacuum their rugs, and that's all I've ever done. I said, well, maybe you could take it as a homework assignment and see if you could come up with something during the week. And then if you can bring the list next week and we'll take a look. I felt pretty defeated, and I'm sure she did also, because the distortions of depression are so, it's like being hypnotized, and you start believing things that just aren't true. But I clearly hadn't cracked it open. The next week, when she came back, I forgot that I'd given her this homework assignment, and I did my usual thing. But I forgot I gave her the assignment, so we were just babbling on like that. It was about halfway through the session, and she said, well, Dr. Burns, did you want to see my homework? And I said, oh, yeah, I forgot. Did you think of anything on your list? And she handed me a list, and she had listed 10 things that she had accomplished. And number one on the list, my husband and all of our family and in-laws died in the Nazi concentration camps. But I managed to smuggle my 2 boys out of Nazi Germany and make it back to the United States. I saved their lives, and I thought that might be a worthwhile accomplishment. And then I got a job cleaning people's houses so we'd have a bed to sleep on at night and food on the table. And so I thought, well, it's humble, but maybe that was a meaningful accomplishment. And then she said, and my oldest son just graduated first in his class at the Harvard Business School. And so maybe that's a kind of accomplishment as well. And then she said, I had forgotten that I speak 5 languages fluently. Maybe that's an accomplishment. And then I'd forgotten about the fact that I'm a gourmet chef, and I can be proud of that as well. So she had all of this list, and there were tears in my eyes when she read it to me. And then I said, well, how do you reconcile this with the belief that you're a worthless human being who's never accomplished anything meaningful in your life? And she says, Dr. Burns, it doesn't compute. I can't reconcile it. It makes no sense. In fact, right now, I can't even figure out why I thought that I've never accomplished anything, or why I thought that I'm worthless. It's not valid. I said to her, well, how are you feeling right now? She said, I'm feeling a whole lot better, Dr. Burns. Do you have any more of those techniques for me? And I said, well, you have to wait another week, and I'll go back to the class and learn another technique. But she was able to terminate therapy, another 2 more sessions, and she was just feeling on top of the world. The distortions she was involved in were mental filtering, focusing on the negatives in her life, especially one called discounting the positive, discounting all the beautiful and awesome things about her, and also emotional reasoning. She felt worthless, felt like a failure, so she thought she was worthless. She was a failure, and maybe you've done the same thing. Felt terrible, and then reason from your feelings that this is the way things really are. And that's so deceptive, because your thoughts create your feelings. And if your thoughts are distorted, if they're not realistic, your feelings will not be realistic either. They'll be like the images in amusement parks with those grotesque curved mirrors that make you look weird. And when you put the lie to those thoughts, your feelings will instantly change. That's one of the greatest feelings a human being can have to recover from depression. And that's when I began to say, maybe there's something to this cognitive therapy. And so after that, I left the university and opened my private practice so I could learn and help develop and popularize cognitive therapy. And then for the next 40 years, I did research. I had over 40,000 hours working with people with severe depression and anxiety. Became really, really good at cognitive therapy, but also evolved a new approach I called T.E.A.M CBT, which is even more powerful and fast-acting in many cases than the original cognitive therapy that helped many people. That's the story of the Latvian immigrant, and I'll never forget her, and I'll never forget the joy that flooded my heart the moment she recovered. It confirmed several things to me that I had doubted, the thoughts that you have, I'm a loser, I'm not good enough, I should be better than I am, why am I so screwed up, why am I so anxious in social situations, I must be defective, there must be something wrong with me. All of that beating up on yourself, that's the cause of your depression and anxiety. And the moment you see the distortions in those thoughts and challenge them, I believe that if you persist, if you stick with it, your life can change in a glorious and fantastic way as well. If you want more help, if you're interested in this, you can try out our app, or you can go to my website, feelinggood.com. There's loaded with free classes, free resources, free podcasts, that type of thing. Thanks for watching. I hope you'll like that beautiful story of the Latvian immigrant. I changed her life, but she changed my life at the same time.